This week I'm going to take you guys along with me while I'm cooking just some good, wholesome, rustic, healthy food for my family of 6. So if you're new here, I'm Elizabeth, welcome. And this week I'm just going to take you guys along with me. I'm going to show you a lot of just the standard recipes that I make in a given week, also that goes with the season. So it's fall right now, we're heading into winter and we've got the holidays coming up, but I like to stick with the basics and just a lot of good for you food. So I like to cook a lot from the garden and the farmer's market, really use a lot of staple whole foods you can find in the grocery store, around the perimeter, definitely not in the middle aisle so much. But I'm gonna show you a lot of things this week, and one of them is gonna be how to make my homemade veggie broth. So a lot of you have been asking me, how do you make your own stocks all the time? Is it easy? Is it hard? How do you do it? So I'm gonna show you guys exactly how I do it today, and I like to do it in the Instant Pot most often because I can just put it in there and kind of forget about it. I can leave the house and don't have to worry about having anything boiling on the stove. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how I'm gonna put this together with some of the veggie scraps I have in my fridge all the time. Almost, I feel like I always have celery or carrots or other things that are just kind of sitting there that need to be used and not wasted. So making your own veggie stock is a great way to do that. I have a website, it's healthyelizabeth.com, and you can get all the recipes usually that I'm talking about in my videos over there. So you can definitely change up the vegetables you use in this. You just want to make sure that you're using mostly things that don't have tons of water content. Like you don't really want to use like cucumber or lettuce, that sort of thing, which is kind of obvious, I think. I'm gonna go ahead and I have some chives that I used this past week that are kind of on their last leg, so I'm gonna put those in. I have a tiny bit of fresh thyme, but honestly, you don't even have to put in fresh herbs, but I do like adding thyme, and the more you add to it, the more nutrients it's gonna have, so I like to kind of use a variety of things. But if you don't have fresh herbs, then you can just throw in some bay leaves, and that's gonna kind of give it that depth of flavor. And then I also have some celery, which I leave the leaves on. You wanna keep all of it, that's fine. Just give it a good rinse so you don't have any dirt in it. You wanna make sure you get all the dirt off for sure when you're making stock. And then I have a few carrots. These are from the grocery store. I do have some coming from my garden now, which is so exciting. So I'm gonna use those in some soup later on this week, but since I had these in the fridge, I'm gonna use these for the stock. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna leave all the peel on the carrots and everything. We want all the nutrition we can get out of these vegetables, and I'm gonna rinse them up and then pop them in the pot. And then we'll flavor it and add a little bit of seasoning. I'm gonna use the carrots, the celery, that. I'm also gonna put in some sweet onions. You could do yellow onions, white onions. I just don't typically do red onion, but I'm gonna do these and garlic, and I leave the skin intact and on and everything. This really couldn't be easier. I won't even cut any of them up. I'll literally just snap them in half, and it's as easy as that. So if you think it's difficult making your own homemade stocks and broths, trust me, it's not. There are so many different reasons I love making my own homemade veggie broth, and one of them is because it's an extremely frugal thing to do. So I love saving money and having really good quality broth to cook with. But then I also love the fact that it helps reduce waste in the kitchen. So I feel like I always have carrots or celery or something in the back of my fridge that's just ready to be thrown out. And so instead of doing that, I can kind of save it beforehand and make a homemade veggie broth. All I'm doing is I'm taking it and I just break it up with my hands and I throw it in the pot. So you want to make sure that you wash it really well first though, because you want to make sure that there's not dirt on it. And like I said, I also will use the skin on all the garlic and onion. But if you get a really dirty onion, you want to make sure that you kind of rinse that off too, because you don't want dirty onion skin going in your stock. So just make sure it's nice and clean. And then I'll go ahead and add in bay leaves, and I like to do a couple tablespoons of good quality salt. This does not have iodine in it. It's just sea salt or Celtic sea salt, one of those. And then I do a little bit of peppercorns just to give it a little kick, and it's not spicy, but it just has nice depth. And then I threw in those fresh herbs. And then you always want to make sure you're using filtered water when you're making your broth. So I get mine out of my Berkey. I love my Berkey, and so I use tons of that, and I'll just fill it up until the max fill line. So there's a line on the inside of your Instant Pot, and you don't want to fill it above that if you're pressure cooking. If you're slow cooking, go right ahead, but if you're pressure cooking like I am today, fill it to that line and then just turn on your pressure cooker. I do it on soup mode for an hour. So one of my family's traditions that we do every single year around Thanksgiving and Christmas and just the holiday season is as soon as the cranberries hit the grocery store shelves, we love making a cranberry orange relish. So as soon as they hit grocery store shelves, I grab a bunch of the organic cranberries and I love to stock up on them, and I'll keep them just in their baggies like this, or you can put them in a freezer bag and pop them in the freezer because cranberries freeze really well. But they're super high in antioxidants, and instead of cooking them down, which tends to like kill those things that we want to keep keep in there for nutrients, I make cranberry orange relish and it stays raw. The vitamins and the minerals and the antioxidants are a little bit more potent when you keep them raw. So I do it like this, and I do it really quickly in a food processor. I only sweeten it with coconut sugar. So it's a really great way to keep festive ingredients in your fridge. Tastes amazing, but still has some nutritional benefits in there. And so I'm gonna make a big batch today and then keep it in the fridge, and we can eat on it all week. This isn't just something that we'll eat around Thanksgiving. We'll keep making it week after week until we're just sick of it. So usually by January, all the cranberries are gone. We've kind of cleared out the freezer of cranberries too, and we're kind of over it. But until then, I'm gonna be making it nonstop. It's delicious, and we love eating it with things like our roasted chicken or roasted turkey, or we'll just eat it with a spoon. It is that good. You'll wanna just eat it straight out of the dish. So let me show you how I'm gonna make it. So there's a couple different ways you can make this. A cool little trick I discovered is normally I'll just make it with the 3 different ingredients. So I'll do cranberries, I'll do oranges, and the coconut sugar. But if you want to make it a little more special and make it more red and vibrant, because when you don't cook the cranberries down, they're not quite as red. But if you add in a little container of just fresh raspberries, it helps to really bring that cranberry color to life. So if you're serving this for Thanksgiving dinner or something like that, then I would go ahead and add the raspberries. But on a day-to-day basis, you're not going to miss it at all. It's just fine like this. That's just a cool little trick, so I thought I'd tell you. I've got 2 little packages here. These are 8 ounces each, so I've got 1 pound of cranberries, and for the 1 pound of cranberries, I think I'm going to be doing about 2 clementines, and you can use regular oranges too, but the reason I like to use clementines is because their skin is so thin. So the cool thing about cranberry orange relish is that you use a food processor and you put in the cranberries raw, and then you add in oranges whole. So I'm going to take maybe the little stem part off, and if you're using regular oranges, I would go ahead and take a paring knife and peel the skin off, or even zest it. You could do that too, but you want to use mostly the whole rind. You don't want to just use zest. So I like to use these little clementines because their skin is nice and thin, but they still have tons of orange flavor. They're really great. And I find sometimes they're even sweeter than the big navel oranges, and citrus is in season during the winter, so they're at their peak. For this recipe, I like to either use coconut sugar or raw sugar. I find those are the best and the healthiest. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how easy this is, and then it just gets better and better as it sits in the fridge. So whenever you take them out of the bag from the grocery store, you're going to want to give them a little rinse so they're nice and clean. And then I go ahead and put them in my food processor. And I also chop up a clementine. You can use a normal orange too, but I love that the clementines have the thin skin, like I said. And then I add in my coconut sugar. And really, it's as simple as that. And I've been using this mini food processor for a few years, and it's actually the reason that I bought it. So if you don't have a big food processor, you can get one of these. They're a pretty small investment. I can link one down below. I think I got this one at Target a couple years ago because we wanted to make it, and so I use it every single year, and I need to get a bigger one now that my family's grown, but it still works and serves its purpose. And this is just so good, whether you're serving it for your family or for Thanksgiving or Christmas or for a church get together or a potluck. This is a hit, and it's kind of unique, healthier, and we just love it. I'll eat it with just about anything during the whole season. I'm out here in the garden, and tonight I'm gonna make some wild rice soup. So it's gonna have mushrooms, and it's not gonna have any dairy or meat, so it's just gonna be wild rice and mushroom soup, just a plant-based soup. And so I'm gonna come out here in the high tunnel here and pick a few of the carrots that I have growing. These are some of the bigger ones that are long, and they're not quite ready yet, so I'm gonna pick some more of the small ones I used last week. We've been eating them a lot with hummus, and they are the best snack, so I'm gonna be growing these every year from now on. They're so good. Oh, I just noticed, I thought this was a carrot, and this is actually a golden beet. I think I'm gonna go ahead and pull it. I haven't pulled one yet out of the garden. I think it's ready because it actually looks like a carrot. Let's go ahead and see. I've never grown these before. I grew these because they don't stain. So like the typical beets will stain your cutting boards and your hands and everything, but golden beets won't. So I thought, especially in a house with lots of kids, this is a good option to grow. So I'm excited to try these.
it.
My love of gardening really stems from my love of healthy eating. So a lot of people are asking me, how can I make organic eating more affordable? And the best way to do that is really just to grow something yourself. Nothing is going to beat that price. So it is such a joy to be able to grow your own food, especially if you have kids and they're able to help you grow it and harvest it. It is one of the best ways to start feeding your family or just yourself really quality, healthy foods.
Good, Mommy. Yeah.
Good job.
Okay.
So tonight our dinner is going to be a really simple and rustic, hearty wild rice soup. And I feel like I cook with the same ingredients all the time, but it's that time of year. This is just what's seasonal and what's in. So I've got lots of carrots and garlic and onions and simple foods, and they really lend themselves to stews and soups really well. So I'm chopping up some onion, and then I have these carrots from my garden. I'm not using the beet in the soup, so I just left it there. But I'm going to chop up these carrots and my onion and my garlic, and I'm going to start this in a pot as the base of my soup. So tonight is actually going to be a dairy-free soup. So if you're dairy-free, this will be great for you. It's a really creamy and hearty soup, and it's vegetarian, it's dairy-free, so it's a really great option for a lot of people. And so I'm going to go ahead and get these diced up, and I always start by preparing my vegetables first. I don't like to get things going in the pot before I have everything chopped up and ready to go, because it just makes it so much easier when you don't have to worry about having something else ready to go in the pot. So for the most part, I do all the prep work ahead of time. So I'm going to go ahead and get my garlic minced up, and I just like to mince it up really fine so it kind of melts into the soup better. And then one of the things I'm going to put in the soup that makes it a little bit heartier and comforting is I'm going to use some poultry seasoning. And I have been using this a lot lately. It's something I really use during the cold weather months because it's just so, I don't know, it's a warming blend of spices. Since herbs are not coming in very much from the garden, it's a great substitute for that. I'll link my poultry seasoning I like down below. It's a really good one, and it's nice and organic and non-GMO. So I'm going to go ahead, and I have some olive oil in my pot that's heated up. So I'm going to go ahead and add in those veggies and let those start softening and cooking down. And while that's happening, I'm going to have my daughter, she's going to help me today. She's going to chop up some of these mushrooms. We're just going to do a nice slice on those. You could dice them too if you want a smaller bite. I always kind of like playing around with the shapes and sizes, but I'm going to go ahead and slice them because we love the texture of mushrooms. Mushrooms are actually my older daughter's favorite vegetable. So I'm going to leave those nice and chunky because we don't mind. So after all of your carrots and onions and celery have cooked down, go ahead and add in those sliced mushrooms, and we're going to let that kind of cook down longer and let those mushrooms get nice and golden, and little bits are going to start sticking to the bottom of the pot. So the onions and the carrots and even the mushrooms are going to start leaving those little bits on the bottom, and that's what we want because that's going to start adding and building the flavor when we scrape up all those little bits, especially since there's not meat in this recipe. We want that because that's where our flavor is mostly going to come from. So my stock has been going in the Instant Pot for a long time. I let it pressure cook and then I let it just sit there on warm mode. And that's what I love about making your own stock too, is it's not fussy at all. You can leave it either on the stovetop on low or in your Instant Pot or your crock pot. It's really simple. So I'm just gonna go ahead and strain that out. And that gives me about half a gallon of fresh vegetable broth. Some of you guys have been asking me what poultry seasoning I use, so I thought I would show you today. This is from Frontier Co-op. I'll leave a link down below. It's organic and has sage, thyme, onion, all the good things. Just a good, clean poultry seasoning. So this really is so easy to make. So I added in my rice and I let that toast for a minute or two in the pan before I added my broth. But then I went ahead and added several cups of broth so we can cook the rice along with a can of full fat coconut milk. You definitely always want to use full fat. You don't want like coconut milk. It's not going to be the same. So use your full fat, and we're going to let that simmer away on the stove. And while that's simmering, I'm going to get started on a little bit of bread that I'm going to serve actually with dinner tomorrow, since I'm using natural yeast, which is just sourdough starter. That way it has plenty of time to ferment and cool. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm making a sourdough rye bread. It's pumpernickel, and it is so good. I love it. So I use my sourdough starter along with some dark rye flour, some molasses. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this together. I always use a digital scale because it's just foolproof. So I'm gonna go ahead and get all of this, including my cocoa powder, which is one of the main ingredients of pumpernickel, which I think is so interesting. I love it though. It's so deep and flavorful and perfect for this time of year. So I'm gonna get this bread fermenting overnight in my dough tub, and then tomorrow I'll go ahead and bake it off. So I went ahead and bottled up the rest of that broth and put a reusable lid on it. I love these for the mason jars. And then my daughter decided to give some of the carrots that were in the stock to the chicken. So they love these fully cooked soft carrots. It was such a treat for them. So once our wild rice soup was ready to go, I just served it with some of my sourdough dinner rolls, and that was dinner tonight.
Appalachian sunrise meets my skin. Even with my eyes still closed, I can feel it coming in.
Early this morning, I went ahead and took the dough that was rising in the dough tub last night, and I went ahead and formed it and put it in a Banneton basket. And then this morning, I'm going to pop it out of there and go ahead and bake it. And I use one of my old Lodge pots. This is the best for baking homemade bread. So I just use a big soup pot and get that going in a really nice hot oven. Okay, so today I'm really excited because we're heading into the weekend. I like to keep little things in the house, so we want to come back home and eat something really yummy. So today I'm gonna make one of my favorite things this time of year. I'm gonna make some homemade apple cider in the crock pot, and we're gonna add all of the good mulling spices to it. So it's gonna be really like warm and cozy. It's perfect for like a little night in with the kids. And I'm gonna leave it in the slow cooker. It's gonna cook all day, and then this evening and tomorrow, because I can take it out of the crock pot and then put it back in on warm. It's gonna be perfect to have on these chilly fall days heading into winter. I'm really excited. It couldn't be easier. Basically, all you're gonna need are a bunch of apples, and I'm gonna use an orange too, just to add a little bit of zestiness and tartness. So I have some green apples that I'm gonna use, and then you can use just kind of like a variety. That way you get some different flavors going. So I have some Fuji apples, and I think my mom's calling. So I have some Fuji apples and I think Gala apples too. So I'm gonna use that along with an orange, and then we'll get all of our mulling spices into the slow cooker. So you could do this in the Instant Pot too, but I'm gonna do it in the crock pot. After that, I'm also gonna make soup in the Instant Pot. And I was gonna say, you obviously don't have to make all these soups and things in the Instant Pot or crock pot, but I think it really depends on what season of life you're in. So for me, I've got 4 kids, 8 and under, and they're homeschooled, so they're here all the time. I don't always have time to put dinner on the table right then and there, and lunch too. The same thing goes for that. So I like to use these tools in my kitchen because it helps me get homemade healthy dinners on the table really often without the stress of it. So not every night I can sit in here and cook something from scratch when my little one is fussy or teething or something like that. If I have something that I can make early in the day and then just have it sitting there warm in the crock pot or the Instant Pot or cooking low and slow all day, that just helps us get good quality meals on the table for my family. If you're in that season of life, go ahead, use those tools as often as you need to. You could use them every single day. Nobody's gonna judge you for that. If you're not in that season of life, maybe it's just you and you don't need to do that, or you like spending time in the kitchen cooking all the time. I do too, I totally get it. It just depends on your season. So all these things I'm making in my Instant Pot and crock pot, you can do the exact same thing with on the stovetop. So don't ever feel like you have to do it my exact way. But I will say for things like meats, they do break down a lot easier and get a lot more tender when you slow cook it. But things like I'm gonna make later, I'm gonna make my version of just this really easy, but oh, so good butternut squash soup using some of the butternut squash from my garden. And you could do the same exact thing on the stovetop. So if you don't have an Instant Pot and stuff, don't worry about that. You can do the same thing on your stovetop. I'm gonna go ahead and get this apple cider in the crock pot because I'm so excited to drink it tonight. I wanna curl up with a cup of freshly made apple cider. I'm so excited about this. So the first thing I'm gonna do, you're gonna wanna wash up your apple. I'm gonna go ahead and quarter these and cut up my orange, and we're just gonna put this in the crock pot with a bunch of filtered water, and then I'll grab my spices. So for the apple cider, I'm just taking my apples and oranges and quartering those up, and you're going to pop them in the crock pot, and then we're going to cover that with filtered water. And I like to use a variety of different apples. You can use Granny Smith, Honeycrisp, any of your favorite apples really work. But since we're leaving the skin on these apples, I suggest you buy organic ones. Any organic apple that fits your budget, try and use those. That way the skin doesn't leak any pesticides into the apple cider. Now, of course, we're going to want to add some spice to this, so I'm using whole cloves and star anise and cinnamon sticks. And this right here is just what gives it that amazing apple cider flavor. And then just to add a little sweetness, I'm sprinkling in some coconut sugar, but you could also use raw honey, which would be perfect for this time of year for a little throat coating. So now I'm grabbing my handy dandy Instant Pot, and I'm gonna get started on my butternut squash soup, which it's so funny because before I started making butternut squash soup at home, I thought I didn't even like it. So anytime I had ever had it from the grocery store or a restaurant, I didn't like it. I didn't really love the texture or the flavor, but now that I make it at home, I suited it to my taste, and I think that it's actually really good, and I think it's one of my favorite soups I can even think of. So if you're not sure about it, give this recipe a try and tell me what you think. I'd love to convert you to the butternut squash soup lovers. So I just put my Instant Pot on saute mode, and then I added in some avocado oil, and I have my garlic and onion sauteing just over low heat in there and getting nice and soft and translucent. And while that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and peel up my honey nut squashes. So if you are using a butternut squash, you can just use one big one, but since I have these honey nut squashes, they're a smaller version of butternut squashes, and so I'm using about 3 of them today. And I also wanted to mention this peeler because I spent half my life looking for a good peeler, and this one is it. It's by Material, and I'll leave it linked down below. You will not be disappointed. It's the best. For a lot of things, I will leave the skin on my butternut squash. Anytime I'm making like little cubes that are roasted to eat, I'll leave the skin on because I love the texture it gives. But for this particular recipe, you definitely want to go ahead and peel it, and then you want to scrape those seeds out and cube it into 1-inch cubes or so. It doesn't have to be perfect because we are going to puree this soup down, so you don't have to be very specific on the size for this. And then I'm just going to give those a rough chop, and those are ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my veggie broth that I made yesterday along with my butternut squash cubes, and then I'm also going to add in that can of full-fat coconut milk, and that's going to make it creamy and rich, and that just really gives a sweetness to it too. I love the subtle hint of sweetness in coconut milk. It makes everything so yummy. Okay, so I have my butternut squash cubes in there now, and I added in that can of coconut milk and broth that I made the other day. I don't like to add too much broth before I cook it and puree it down because I like to make sure the consistency is just right. I add a little bit more at the end if I need to, just to thin it out. So now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna season this up. For seasonings, there's a couple different things I like to do. So sometimes I'll leave it just plain with a really basic seasoning and have more of a pure butternut squash soup. But to be honest, my favorite thing is to add a little bit of curry powder, and it doesn't taste like a curry per se, but it tastes more full of flavor, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna add in some curry powder, onion powder, garlic powder, and I'm also gonna do salt and pepper, and I'm gonna throw in a bay leaf too. The onion powder and garlic powder, I'm just gonna eyeball because you really can't go wrong with too much of that. So I'm just gonna kind of do some sprinkles in there. And I'll leave some exact measurements for you guys down below because I know some of you don't want to cook that way. You want to have exact measurements, so I always really think through my process so I can know what to tell you guys. And then for the curry powder, I am going to measure out, where are my measuring spoons? And it's not going to make it spicy. This is just a yellow curry powder. Really bring out the flavor of butternut squash. We're gonna do that. And actually, I forgot to do it today because I was distracted. But I usually, when my onions and garlic are sauteing, I'll go ahead and add in my seasonings then and kind of just toast them up because it kind of makes almost like a curry paste when you do that. So I go ahead and do that, and then I add in my broth and my coconut milk, but I forgot to today. But that's okay. It'll taste the same. So I'm just gonna stir this up, and then you could either let this slow cook all day, but I really don't think you need to. I'm just gonna go ahead and pressure cook this for a few minutes, probably about 20 minutes until that butternut squash is nice and tender. And then I like to go in with my immersion blender right inside of the Instant Pot, and I'll give it a nice puree. So I'm gonna go ahead and let that pressure cook for a few minutes and then let it release its pressure naturally. And then right at the end, I'm gonna puree it and add in my secret ingredient that kind of makes this whole soup come together and almost tastes more like a bisque, which I love. We're gonna let that go, and tonight I'm gonna serve this up for dinner with some of the homemade sourdough pumpernickel bread that I made yesterday. I really have to tell you guys about this soup because it is that good. It's such a staple soup, especially in the fall and winter. It has the best flavor. I'm telling you, a mixture between that little bit of curry powder, the coconut milk, and that dash of sherry wine is what makes this soup. So if you've never tried that in your creamy butternut squash soup before, I'm telling you, it gives it the best flavor and a little bit of sweetness. You can taste it beforehand and then taste it after you add that little bit of sherry wine, and it just makes the soup that much better. So this is delicious, and I'm gonna serve it tonight with a little bit of this homemade sourdough pumpernickel that I made yesterday. We've already eaten half of it, of course, because the moment my kids see fresh bread in the house, it's instantly slathered in butter and they run off. So we're gonna eat this tonight along with the butternut squash soup, and this is just one of my favorite easy go-to lunches and dinners. So don't forget, you guys can get this recipe down below or just go to my website, healthyelizabeth.com. If you guys are hosting this season, you honestly have to try this because it's such a step up from the bottled stuff that you get at the grocery store. So I let this cook for hours and hours, and then I mashed up all the fruit just with a wooden spoon, or you could use a potato masher. And then I have a big bowl underneath of a stainless mesh colander. I love this one. And I'm going to pour all of those bits of fruit. It's almost like applesauce, but you want to pour it all in there and just mash it up and get all that juice out. And a little trick is I actually like to strain it twice because it gives it the perfect consistency. So I pour that back into my crock pot, and you can mash it up a little more and get all that juice out. We don't want to waste it. Then I like to add in some sliced clementines along with some fresh cranberries, and I add in a little more spices just for that beautiful look. It is such a showstopper and definitely a crowd pleaser. So if you want to make this holiday season, it is just absolutely outstanding. Whether you're just cozied up at home or you're going somewhere, trust me, everyone is going to love this.